This is Art Television.
Sometimes, what I have seen, even though, for example, last week I couldn't come here because I was teaching a retreat over Zoom. There's so much. Don't think that because I'm not here, I'm on holiday or something. There's always stuff going on, always teaching in many different venues, but obviously without going on an aircraft to go to such places. And it's still, you do get some good results, apparently. People actually tell me that, teaching meditation online does actually work. And sometimes people do get some nice deep meditations, which is wonderful. But it's not only that, you get some insights in this time of this time of COVID. Just in many places, there's a lot of negativity, and the negativity is growing and growing and growing. We've been really quite fortunate here in Western Australia that all of the disease of COVID hasn't really sort of had a big influence on us, in the sense we can still come and go wherever we want. We can still come to this hall here. We don't have to wear masks. We don't have to. The only people who wear masks in here are people who come and rob the place, do they? They used to have that in the old days, people wearing masks. The only people who wear masks are people who... what was that? Oh yeah, I don't think I've told this one for a while, about this gentleman who went to a bank. He'd actually robbed the bank without wearing any sort of disguises. He went to the counter and says, he had a gun or something, and said, please give me sort of a few $1,000s. And of course, the people in the bank these days were actually told, if somebody asks like that, just please give it over. Give them the money, because otherwise we don't want to see anybody injured. And so anyway, that's why this afternoon, Bill, he told everybody, you've got these electronic things now. I can see one in the back over there. But please, there should be a sign up there. Please don't try using those machines if you have Parkinson's disease, because you can't tap it once. You tend to tap it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But anyway, so he robbed the bank, and apparently it's a true story. I've got the article which explained it. After he robbed the bank, he went into the foyer and just sat down on a chair and waited to be arrested. And soon the police came and they said, you're the guy who robbed the bank. He said, yeah, here's the money. I confess. And when he went to trial, they asked him, why did you do that? Well, I told my wife, it's so noisy. I had such a difficult time living in the house with you. I thought, I could go to jail instead. It'd be more peaceful. So please give me respite by putting me in jail. Now the trouble is there's such a thing called the law of karma. If you do things like that, the things which you don't expect, so come back at you. The judge actually did tell him off and give him a sentence of home detention. Ugh, those judges. But anyway, so sometimes people do get a bit upset or find it difficult to live in this life. And of course that also reminds me of what people do, when life gets very tough for them and life doesn't turn out the way you want to. You can't go here, you can't go there. And sometimes a business packs up, you can't get people to help out, and things get more and more difficult. Because of that, sometimes that people do get sort of depressed and negative, and it's difficult to survive in that world. But there's always ways to overcome that, and that's one of the reasons why in Buddhism we have all these skillful means and ways of dealing with difficulties. That's one of the reasons why that if you want to come and learn philosophy and just the meaning of life as a thought, as an intellectual idea, this is not really the place to come to. The reason I say that is because so often when I was young, as a young spiritual searcher, that people would say all these ideas about the meaning of life, the nature of the soul, the nature of the universe, the nature of this, the nature of that, and they would argue about the meaning of life. And they would argue so much, they would never have any happiness in life. And for those of you who have heard Buddhist stories, the Buddha said that's like someone being shot by an arrow. And when they're shot by an arrow, they try and figure out exactly what is an arrow, and what type of wood, and how does it fly through the air, and how could its point actually penetrate my skin, and why does it actually hurt? Why does being shot by an arrow feel so painful? Why do people allow this to happen? It shouldn't be this way, but this is... Instead of doing that, the obvious thing to do is, to ring 000 and get an ambulance to come, or a doctor to heal you. And I got that idea, that the meaning of that little simile a long time ago, instead of actually feeling what the meaning of life is. What actually creates happiness in you? What takes away some of the difficulties of your life? Why do we suffer so much? And so that became the most important thing, and it was also one of the reasons why I became a monk, and why I stayed as a monk, and why I went to places like Thailand. It was because people like an Ajahn were some of the happiest people I've ever seen. And it wasn't just a happiness. Some of you only see the monks here, or the nuns, just for an hour a day, or 2 hours, or 3 hours, or 4 hours. But what do we get up to when we're in our rooms, or for me, my cave? That's one of the reasons why, if ever you go to Bodhinyana Monastery, or especially on these big days, even this weekend, before I left, somebody said, would you mind if this person who's staying at Bodhinyana Monastery this weekend, they go and have a look in your cave while you're away? Yeah, sure. Why not? Nothing to hide there. And that's a wonderful thing. The cave is like my bedroom. It's my private quarters. My holy of holies. Whatever you wish to call it. But it's almost like open. People can go and have a look and see how I live, and see what's underneath the carpet. Actually, there is no carpet. What's underneath the mattress? Actually, I haven't had a look what's underneath the mattress for a long time. What's underneath the mattress?
Just the foam line.
The foam line, okay. But anyway, so because it's open, please, when you go in there, don't put anything underneath the mattress. I don't know what's underneath it. But anyway, just the idea to say that, what is actually real happiness? You don't fake it. You don't just put it up there and just do stupid things afterwards. So it's real. And that's what you saw with an Ajahn Chah. That's what you saw with some of these monks and nuns I knew. They were peaceful and they were happy. And that was important to know, that the philosophy is one thing. It helps, it supports, it grounds the mind in happiness, but the happiness was the main thing. So little by little, when you saw the difficulty people have in life, you wondered why. And you know that sometimes there's one of those phrases, and this is not sort of actually from the Buddhist text, but it could have been said by the Buddhist, like summarizing his teachings. And that was, when you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. When you want something more, you cannot enjoy what you already have. And that's just a powerful teaching, which I apply to so many, many things. When you really want sort of a bigger monastery, more monks, more fame, more money, more donations, more this, more that, you cannot really enjoy what you have right now, which is great. And sometimes you look at yourself, your house, your home, or if you live under a bridge. The bridges in Perth these days are far better than they used to be 50 years ago. So the bridges these days, if you happen to be living under a bridge, it's luxury compared to before. Oops. So it's, what you're doing there is actually appreciating what you have, rather than always thinking what you want more. And you look at even your life. Sometimes, what do I have? What do I want? And sometimes you notice that you want things all the time. Even when you go to bed at night, you dream about things. Or you can't go to sleep because you're too tired because you want too much. And the idea of simplifying so you can have very little is wonderful. And some of those teachings, I was very pleased when Venerable Mudu came. He came just 2 weeks ago. He's the monk down in Albany. And many of you just been to see him recently. So I said, what I teach, I actually practice. I said, lower my expectations. And so when I went to see him a couple of months ago, and afterwards people said, what's it like down there? I said, it's wonderful. Were you satisfied? Because I'm his big boss. And he said, I'm really satisfied. And the reason why I was so happy with this place down there is because I didn't have any expectations. So I wasn't disappointed. The more expectations you have, then the harder it is to live up to them, and the more disappointed you will be in life. As a monk, I can get away with that, having a few expectations, because it's something like spiritual about that. You try and say that to your boss at work, and you may be in trouble. But it's a wonderful thing to have few expectations, which means I wasn't looking for something more. I could really appreciate what was down there. And quite frankly, it's beautiful down there. And he's a reasonably good monk. So, no expectations make me very satisfied. So what happens, like today when this couple got married? You tell them, just look at her, the wife, have no expectations. Then you'll never be disappointed. Look at him. And have no expectations. When you want something more, you'll always be disappointed. How many of you have been married? Did you have any expectations? That's why it's suffering. Know your expectations. And it's much happier. You know, I've never been married. Came close a couple of times. And just today, it's one of my favourite stories, because sometimes people ask me, so Ajahn Brahm, have you ever been afraid? And I was once. And fear is not really quite the right word. It's like traumatised. And because it was just in the marriage, I was telling the monks that what happened, I was still a student at Cambridge, and apparently the girls there, they thought that's a really nice sort of catch, Cambridge students, because they're supposed to be rich. If they'd only known that, become a monk, got no money at all, who would marry someone like me? No future in it. Just renunciation. I was going to tell this story, but I didn't dare, about the 3 rings of marriage. How many of you are thinking of getting married soon? If you do, please put your fingers in your ear and don't listen to this. The 3 rings, I remember saying this to one guy once who comes in regularly, and after I said it, he didn't laugh. I was really quite surprised, because he usually has a great sense of humour. He said, I'm just going to Indonesia to get married next week. Oh boy, wish I'd have known now, I wouldn't have told the joke. But the 3 rings of marriage, the engagement ring, wedding ring, and the 3rd ring? No, caring. Caring. No, it is suffering, But anyway, going back to the scariest moment of my life, stupid things which young men do, and young women do as well, is all the same. I say that carefully, because all the same underneath in our minds. But anyway, after the marriage, the guys were, just hanging around, and we started a stupid conversation, who's going to be next? And one of my friends, he was actually quite a good sportsman, and he was also, really smart, and they said, oh yeah, Jeff, he'll be next. Actually, Jeff ended up being the he joined the civil service in England and became a consul, diplomatic service in Macau for many years. It was really interesting. That's what he actually said, that he was a consul. But I think he was MI6. What do you reckon? But anyway, that so they said, no one will marry him. And the next person they chose was me. My name was Peter at the time. And they said, you'll be the next to get married. And then they looked at me and said, nah, no one would marry him. And then it just happened to me, this girl standing next to me who had a bit of a crush on me. And she whispered in my ear, I would. And I still remember that to this day. I moved away and made sure I was scarce. Just a young guy. I wasn't ready to enter the scariest moment. But sometimes you ask yourself, why is that marriage so difficult? Why do people have... And sometimes, I don't know why, but I've never been married, of course, but it helps when we don't want so much. The house in which you live in, is it big enough for you? Again, go and see the house which I live in. It's so easy to clean. Why do we have so much? So many rooms. Can't we be simple? That's one of the things which we teach as Buddhist monks. These here nuns, keep it simple, please. That's one of the better teachings. It's not just giving words and jokes and stuff. It's actually just how we live. And if you keep it simple, it's much easier to look after and clean. And it's also much cheaper. You don't expect so much. Look at your parents, grandparents, people. Even when you go on holidays, you go camping. Just a little tent. Aren't you happy in that? Yeah, I had a little tent. Must have been a monk in my past life, because some of these tents which I had, they were just old-style tents. I couldn't afford anything. This was only in the 60s. And just remember going over to Norway and to the north of England, north of Scotland, in those little tents. And they were beautiful to sleep in. And sometimes you can go in such remote areas. There wasn't any hotels or no tracks or anything. There's something about that solitude and that really wilderness which really I loved. You go there and you wouldn't see anybody for days. Even as I was still a student. And the north, just saying, over in Norway. I remember just seeing, even though it was summertime, up in the mountains, it was always very cold. So I remember seeing this little lake up in the mountains, and there was ice melting into it, so it was freezing. But I was young, 19 or 20 or something. I thought, why not? So I jumped in the lake. It was freezing all by myself. I had to take all the clothes off. I didn't have any swimming gear or anything. Just go into it. And it was so cold, but so invigorating as well. There's little things you could do which you never done before. You never do again. And I remember just turning a corner, basically a big rock up in those mountains, and spying one of the biggest birds I've ever seen, a king eagle. I checked afterwards, and those birds exist. As big as me. Huge. It was actually just sitting there, looking at me. And I realized that, that could do you a lot of damage. They could kill you or injure you very easily. So very careful. When you saw that, you turned around and you walked back. It's amazing sometimes some of the things you see, especially when you go to wilderness areas. Those wilderness areas, they give you a lot of joy and peace, but sometimes there's some other beings who rely on those wilderness areas. And I've told this to the monks. I think I've told it here, told it on retreats. One of the weirdest experiences which I had when I was a monk at this time. And this was up in the north of Thailand. We're very close to the borders between Burma and Thailand. And I had this wonderful place where I was meditating. And in there, one day, in the afternoon, you tend to get sensitive enough to know there's something weird happening outside. Sometimes people say like electricity in the air, or the goosebumps start coming up on the back of your neck for no reason. Still you know that something was happening. And I've got a reasonably good memory of those times. And what I actually saw when I went out of my little hut was to see just the sky was covered with birds of all species. They were all up in the air. They weren't migrating or anything. They were just covering the sky. Millions of birds from the jungles, the rainforests. And in the middle there was these two huge birds. They weren't eagles. I knew that much. And I thought, wow, the idea I had, the feeling I had, this was like the king and the queen of the birds. Please remember, I was from UK, where they have a king and a queen and stuff, and royal family. It's like the leaders of the birds. And to this day, they were so huge. I've never seen anything like it in my life again. You often wonder that idea that we have in Buddhism and many other places, in old indigenous cultures, of like Garudas, the heavenly birds, is what the Indonesian airline is named after. And sometimes I just wonder whether that was Garudas you saw. But the point is, you were never scared, because these huge beings were just like kind. It's weird. I was actually more afraid of girls whispering in my ear, I would. That's what scared me. But anyhow, just when we want something more, we can't enjoy what we already have. And of course, this is the time, the end of the year. A lot of times people have some holidays. I hope you have some holidays. And if you do have those holidays, I'll just let you know, because I should really announce this, that after the new year, I'm just doing my own personal little retreat for 9 days in my cave, just to take a rest, to be peaceful, because sometimes I get tired. I'm 70 years old now, and I don't have any other holidays, so I make sure I take my own holiday. So don't please sort of expect to see me at Bodhinyana Monastery, after the new year, until the time of the Jhana Grove retreat in mid-January. So even I need a rest as well. So little by little, you learn just how to make the best use of your life. And sometimes you don't need to go to another place. Many of you come to visit Bodhinyana Monastery or Jhana Grove. You find it peaceful, a nice place to visit, I hope. So why can't the monks or the nuns, why can't we enjoy that place as well? A lot of times it's because we think we need something more. Sometimes you can look at I think they probably still have them on the TVs, all the advertisements of where you're going to go next, where you want to be next. They just stimulate your desires and wants, but what do you really want? What do you really need? A lot of times what we really need is a place where we can become at peace, where we're accepted, where we've got no business to do. That's one of the great things about joining a monastery just for a week or 2 weeks on retreat, because you don't have to make any decisions about it. Somebody tells you to wash the dishes. That's one of the reasons why, that washing the dishes is one of the most beautiful things you can do. You just wash them, that's all. You don't have to put in a proposal to your boss, to the committee, about how the dishes should be washed. That's why sometimes, what do you want a dishwasher for? Sometimes doing simple tasks like washing dishes or sweeping the floor is much better. And you learn so much. When I used to wash dishes, this is what I learnt. I learnt that in order to have a peaceful time and not be obsessive about dishwashing, when you get to the point in washing the dishes, you've got more clean dishes in the cupboards than dirty dishes in the sink. Then quit while you're ahead. I can't do that. Why not? Why are people so obsessive that everything has to be cleaned up before you can take a rest and do some meditation or something? One of my sayings, and this is one of my sayings, never do today what you can put off until tomorrow, because you might die tonight. It's true, that'll be true one day. Have you seen people who are really obsessive? Everything has to be really spotlessly clean. If that's the case, you find that you have very little peace in this world. Because the world isn't spotlessly clean. You're fighting a battle you cannot win. This world is a mess at times. If you don't believe me, go and read the latest news about governments. It's always been that way. It's amazing. But life keeps going on. Because after a while we learn so much when things go wrong. I'm mentioning this, that this is a time when I was a school teacher. That also taught me about what making mistakes is all about. A lot of times we are afraid to make mistakes. And that makes us, because we're afraid, we don't try anything. We're just so disencouraged. We're afraid. But it's not as if it hurts us, because if it hurts us, it's only a very little bit. And it goes away pretty quickly. But we're afraid of what people think about us when we make mistakes. I don't know why the world is like that. They're so critical if you make a little mistake. And they don't realize just how difficult it is, to make decisions. I mention that because, one of my favourite politicians was the former Premier of Western Australia, Jeff Gallop. So I received a nice Christmas card from him yesterday. Every year he sends me a Christmas card. Very nice of him. He's also still the patron of Jhana Grove Meditation Centre. And the reason was because the reason why he resigned because of his depression, and he did actually come over to myself and even to Bodhinyana, just almost like secretly, just actually to get over his, get a different attitude, not to get over, but to get a different attitude, to why he was depressed. Little by little, so Buddhism can actually help in these areas. And so because of that, you got to know him reasonably well. All the wonderful things which he did, that doesn't get reported in the newspapers. I remember one of the elections there, I saw the big poster. I saw him with his finger in his ear. And that was the poster from the opposition, the other party, tried to make sure you don't vote for him. Who would vote for anybody who puts his finger in his ear? But anyway, I thought this is so difficult being a politician, because it's so hard to please everybody. And anyway, can't we have times when we don't look at what people have failed at, but what people have succeeded at? And at schools, when I was a teacher, it's not what you fail at which is important. It's all the wonderful things you succeed at. Those are the ones you take with you into your future. Too much of life, we focus on failure far, far, far too much. People feel they're a failure, they let other people down. But instead of looking at failure is where we learn. That's where we grow. That's where we find our weaknesses. And it's much better to think that you tried, you gave it a go, well done. You don't have to be the winner. As long as you gave it the best you can. You learned so much on the journey. That's more important than this silly idea of success. what you think you have to do is not what other people think you have to do. I don't know if you ever tried this with the people you're close to, a good friend, but sitting down with a piece of paper and just asking your friend, what do you think of me? And you write down on a piece of paper what you think of them. And then swap. I remember doing that when I was a young monk, only 2 years as a monk, with another English monk. And what he thought of me, what he wrote down, what he thought of me, was nothing like I thought he would think of me. And what I wrote down, again, was nothing like he expected. And the reason we did that was to show that we are so controlled by what we want others to think of us, that because of that we suffer so much. And we don't get it right. They're not thinking of us that way. Because of trying to live up to other people's expectations, we don't know what those expectations are. We suffer a great deal. There comes a time in our life, and especially if you're a monk or a nun or something, you get the wisdom, you just go and be you, however that you is. You don't try and impress other people, because you don't know how to. You don't know what impresses other people. You may think you do, but try that, just asking other people, what impresses you? What would you like out of me? And you probably get it totally wrong. So that's one of the reasons why, just when I was a teacher, I learned that making mistakes is okay, in a very deep, profound way. It showed that you gave it a try, and you weren't afraid to make a mistake. You learned from those making mistakes, and you grew from those mistakes. This is how we adapt, grow, and become bigger, if you like. There's the old story of the donkey in the bottom of the well. That donkey in the bottom of a well, he fell in the well. The well was dry and the donkey was in the bottom. And a farmer came past, and he heard that donkey, ee-oh, 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 which, if you know donkey language, that means help. And the farmer looked and saw this donkey at the bottom of the well. The farmer never liked donkeys, especially that donkey. That donkey would go through the holes in the fences and eat the crops and all sorts of other things. So he said, I always wanted to get rid of this donkey, but honestly, that's a very dangerous hole in the ground. I should have filled it up years ago, so I'll fill it up now with a donkey in the bottom. Ha 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 ha. That would teach the donkey a lesson. So that farmer got out a spade and started digging earth and throwing it in the bottom of the well, on top of the donkey. He's a very cruel farmer. But once this donkey felt dirt being thrown all over it, the donkey shouted even louder, ee-oh, 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 which in donkey language means, what are you doing that for? But then after a little time, the donkey started making any sounds at all. The donkey was silent. And that farmer thought, I haven't thrown that much earth into the bottom of the well, but maybe it's already buried, I don't know. So the farmer kept on throwing the earth into the well, spade load after spade load after spade load. But you know what the donkey was doing? The donkey was wise. The donkey had mindfulness and kindness to himself. He stopped complaining when dirt was thrown all over him. Instead, the donkey shrugged it off, stamped it in, and became an inch closer to the top of the well. Another spade load, stamped it in, became even higher. Another spade load, and got even higher. Now that's what you should do. If you get criticized, treated badly, things don't go well in life, it's like just the whole universe is against you, nothing works. Oh, it's so difficult, you can't go here, you got no one to feed you, you got no friends, they totally misunderstand you. Shrug it off, stamp it in, and you're closer to the surface of the well. And that's what happened. Soon the donkey was close enough to the top of the well, the donkey jumped out and ran away. He actually did something else, but if you want to find out what he did, that's in the book which I wrote, one of the books which I wrote. I shouldn't really tell you, but he bit the backside, the ass of the... Oh, stop encouraging me. Of the farmer to teach him the law of karma. If you try to bury an ass in the bottom of a well, you get bit on yours. But anyhow, that's a beautiful little anecdote of how you deal with some of the bad things which happen in life, like criticism, like sickness, like losing money, losing investments, losing important things in your life. You got a choice. You've lost it anyway. It's gone. It didn't work out the way you expected, because your expectations were a bit too much, but it's difficult to deal with. But a lot of times there's all these little wonderful ways of shrugging it off, stamping it in, and you grow higher. You learn that one of the best antidotes to suffering is kindness and wisdom to yourself. And the wisdom, don't keep thinking about other people are talking about you and what they're saying. One of the worst criticism I got years ago was just when we were living in our first temple in Magnolia Street, and we were putting stuff in the back of a car. Tachi was building material to take down to Serpentine. This was when the first year of Bodhinyana Monastery. And as I was loading up the old combi van, there was a girl, 14 years of age or 13 years of age, I reckon, came out of her house next door and looked at me. And the way she looked at me was just, I can never forget, because she had her hands on her hips. And she looked at me with disgust, up and down. And she said, "You're dressed like a girl. That's sick." Because, monks, we were skirts, I suppose, and this is a dress. But she said that with such seriousness, and I just burst out laughing. I thought it was so funny. And he said, "Well, we're monks, we're not girls." He says, "We always wear this stuff." There's a nice little story which you can have. But you weren't disgusted by it. That was the most important thing. Whatever happened to you, you know exactly what you were doing and why. It's just like the time when we were ordained the first 4 bhikkhunis. And I was asked to go to Thailand just actually to say what I'd done. So I wasn't at all ashamed of that or afraid of that, so off you went over to Thailand. What are you that for? That's not according to the Vinaya. It is according to the Vinaya. One of the things was, and one of the things which many people understood, was that I did know my stuff. This Vinaya is a monk's rules. What can you do, what you can't do. I did my job first of all to make sure that I knew what I was doing was protected. This is our code of conduct. So first of all you had the law, if you like, the law of Buddhist monks. That was right behind you. And you could explain it to everybody. And of course also it was the right thing to do, as plenty of people know these days. And the gender equity. And look, how many people here, what's the gender discrimination here, or the gender breakdown? It's most of you are female in this room. Why not? And sometimes I say that the theory is good. What about the practice? how do we actually live this life? Is it fair? And we try our best to make it fair. That's why if you really want to ask more about that, next week, Ajahn Hasapanya is giving the talk. And with another nun, you can actually see it's kind of working. Some years ago, no, only 2 years ago I think it was, it was a call I was expecting. There was a lady in the ABC who was exposing, for the Me Too movement, all of the abuse which was happening in religious organizations. And they'd done the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, even the Muslims, and so many others. And I thought, when are they going to get to the Buddhists? And so when there's two journalists, I forget their names now, but when one of them called and I answered the phone, he said, "Oh, you're Ajahn Brahm, you're one of the leaders of the Buddhist community in Australia. Can I talk to you about what you're doing about sexual abuse, discrimination, and there's other things which are happening in religious organizations?" And it was just, in a sense, a bit of good fortune at the time for the Buddhism that the head of the Buddhist Society of WA was actually a female. That was Cecilia Mitra. The spiritual director of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia was Hasapanya, and she was also, I think, the head of the Australia Sangha Association. We had all bases covered. Phew. It wasn't a sense of that, just few, but it does work. So our organisation doesn't have too much of a problem there. We could always do better, but we make sure that we practice what we preach. May all beings be happy and well. That's a sense of asking everybody to help out. And when somebody comes up and says they're discriminated against, it's important to let them have their say. Listen and feel and see what happens. Exactly what to do next. You don't anticipate, in my experience, don't anticipate the outcomes or the path, but let it evolve by itself. Someone is suffering, and as Buddhism we're trying, out of compassion and kindness, to make sure that we don't just ignore that, to make sure we can do something about it as best we can. We can't be perfect, never will happen, but we try to do better. That's what I meant, that when we make mistakes, we learn from them. If you think mistakes should never happen, please come into the real world. Mistakes do happen. We try to make them less, learn from them, to make it better next time. Donkeys do fall into wells, but donkeys, Buddhist donkeys, know how to get out of the well. Throw me some more dirt, please. And you can stamp it in, and that's a way to escape. Shouting your lungs out just makes you hoarse. Was that joking? That I suppose horse, donkey? No, not quite. But anyway, little by little, we learned just how to use these. And to me, that was far more useful than having theories about things like Nibbana, Four Noble Truths, things which people can actually learn and know and get some good growth from. And later on, with that deeper appreciation of happiness and suffering and having less expectations, you put that into practice in your spiritual life, and then it really starts to take off. What do you expect when you sit down to meditate? If you expect anything that becomes a hindrance, an obstacle, Expecting is a wanting. It creates ill will when you don't get what you want. It tires you out and causes you sloth and torpor. Creates more sort of ideas which mean you just keep thinking. That's called restlessness. And you always have doubt, does this path work or not? You don't have the experience to back up all these theories. And those are the 5 hindrances. But when you have no expectations, allow this moment to be, and then you find out what this moment truly is. What happiness is, what peace is, what freedom is. Little things, but deep things. The 2 freedoms. The freedom of desire, to have enough money, means to get what you want, or the freedom from desire. It's powerful, just one change of word. Freedom of desire to freedom from desire. Freedom from desire, you just no expectations at all. Happy to be here, at peace with this moment, no matter what this moment is. No matter what. Now that's a wisdom which is deep, powerful, and works. So when you're meditating, no desire, totally at peace. So when people ask me, Ajahn Brahm, what do you want for Christmas? Someone did that. They just asked me, what do I want for breakfast tomorrow morning? Actually, I don't know. I trained myself for years, not to have any wants, or people ask me, and just not to say. So if you wanted $1 million, if I gave you $1 million, what would you say to me? You'd say, no thank you. Would you say that? I haven't got $1 million, so I can't give you anything anyway. You might as well say, I don't need it, or whatever. But little by little, this is actually just comes much more to the heart of Buddhism. Just like you know the teacher is the real deal by just checking out where they live. You know if the teaching is the real deal, the teaching is the real deal, if it works for you. Makes you more peaceful, happy, at ease, especially when everything goes wrong. It hasn't really gone wrong, it's just gone different, that's all. Checking your expectations. Okay, so that's enough for this evening for me with the speech. Now we come to the questions. Any questions from the audience here, from the floor, from the chairs, from the cushions? So many people log into this. So the first question is from Santa Claus in North Pole. If everybody thought like Buddhists, Ajahn Brahm, no one wanted anything, I'd be out of a job. Absolutely true. I was always curious why the monk should have celibacy. Isn't that nice to have someone to love and to have kids and family later? I've got many people I can love. Each one of you. I've known many of you for such a long time. So this is celibacy is something else. It's basically celibacy is to make babies. Well, not celibacy the other way. I am true to my word. I make mistakes as well. You know, celibacy makes life much more peaceful, honestly. Because sometimes I get told off for being honest, but I used to be heterosexual, have girlfriends, sexual relationships when I was a layperson. But afterwards, when you became a monk, it's much more peaceful. I didn't basically miss it. So it was wonderful just because the meditation was so strong. And it's much better. Honestly, this was for me. It's my personal choice. So I don't tell everyone to become monks or nuns. But nevertheless, you love just the joy, the peace of celibacy. It's not a forced thing. You do it because you love it. And having somebody to love, look, just each one of you, you have the same sort of affection for you. And you can actually go deeper into that affection, understanding people, because I don't want anything out of you. I can just give. And to have kids. It's great to see all the kids. Some of the kids, you bring them to the dharnas, they can run around and make a noise. Some of those stories with the kids which run around and make a noise here. Now there are mothers and their grandmothers, and they come and say, oh yeah, when I was a little kid, grandchild, I used to run around Nolamara temple, and I remember they did that. I've been a monk now for 47 years, I think 38 years over here in Perth, and 38 years is 2 generations. So I know some of the kids, look, I can't resist telling stories, that this was one kid, she was the daughter of a Thai lady, and she was only about 7 or 8 years of age, but she was very precocious. She wasn't really afraid of other people. So, when Ajahn Joko, the first abbot here, when he went back to Thailand for a little while, I was just like Venerable Metaji here, just sitting down next to me, just being the attendant, not saying anything. I'd done this for about 5 or 6 months. Just sitting next to Ajahn Joko, just being quiet, just making sure if there's anything he needed. But then when he went to Thailand, I had to do the talking. And after I gave my first talk, this young girl came up and said, wow, you can talk? I thought you were brain damaged. I always remember that. That's a cute little thing to think, just because you were taught. But you can talk, can you? Ooh, ooh. And these little kids have grown up now, and you see them, and they're almost like part of the family. And sometimes they actually say that. Say, oh, you're part of the family, so, you come and have photographs with them and goodness knows what else. And that's one of the greatest compliments of being a monk. Not the greatest compliment, but at least, being a teacher. That people trust you. All those years, nothing gone wrong. And trust you so that their kids can run around and their kids feel at ease with you. So when it's a time for them to get married, like one of them today, so that, you have to go there for them and do all those little talks. So anyway, we have celibacy because it's more peaceful. And it means that sometimes, have you ever seen the Buddha statues? The best Buddha statue, you can't, it's supposed to be a man, but you can't really tell whether it's a man or a woman. It's just in between. So that male-female divide and the sexuality which comes from that difference is just not there in a Buddha statue and not there in a Sangha. At least that's our goal anyway. From Indonesia. How is it possible not to grieve or cry when loved ones die? What to do when thoughts of worry keep popping up while meditating? As you told before, worry is one of the hindrances. Look, even when loved ones die, you know what happened? That during our rains retreat, which is in the winter time here in Western Australia, I did ask people, and they were all really, really good. And they said, ask me, please don't die during the rains retreat. Because going to funerals, we're supposed to be meditating in our monastery, and going out of the monastery is very difficult during the rains retreat. And people were really, really good. There's only about 3 or 4 funerals, I think, during the 3 months of the rains retreat. But now the rains retreat is over, we're always going to funerals. So many people are dying. And we figure out the reason why is because they were very obedient and they were just waiting for the right opportunity after the rains retreat finished. That's one of the first reasons why we don't need to get upset when people die. Don't make it so serious. It's part of life. And sometimes you see kids come to funerals, and they don't understand the grief when they're only 3 or 4 years of age. And I really welcome them. Any funerals which I do, they're mostly welcome. And please, mum, dad, grandparents, don't tell them to be quiet. That's their nature. You want people actually to see that, the kids, this new life, not just old life. Too many old people go to funerals. Not enough young people. So to balance it, and it puts a different perspective on it. And how do we balance that? Number one, it's part of life. Number two, please remember not what's taken away, what you've had. I love the simile of the concert, which I always say at every funeral I give. The concert is when the concert's over, you stand up and clap. You don't cry. Oh, the concert's finished. I've never seen anybody cry here when I say, right, now it's time to go. The talk, Friday night talk's over. Now that's one of the reasons why that years ago, when we're thinking of inviting teachers to come to Perth when they could, teachers to come to Perth to teach meditation retreats, we said, oh, look at this. They have a photograph of all the people who went on the retreat. And they're already so happy, really happy. I said, well, that's obvious. So that photograph was taken at the end of the meditation retreat. They're all happy because now they can go home. Watch the TV or just have some dinner or something. So you always take pictures in the middle. And then you'll find out what's a good teacher or not. So anyway, I never cried when my father died, even though I loved him very much. I haven't cried since. I love the man. It's all wonderful to have him as a father for so long. Did I miss him? I always remembered the times I had with him. So he didn't grieve. It's a different way of looking at death. We have been conditioned, not hypnotized, brainwashed into thinking that death is sad. You come here and you find it doesn't need to be sad. If the person is a really good person, they lived a wonderful life, you celebrate. You really do celebrate. You don't feel sad. Tears don't come. Who are you crying for? You're crying for yourself.